The Tsolok had lived for millennia on their death world, a planet that defied nature itself. Massive storms raged across the surface, filling the skies with chaotic lightning and howling winds. The oceans boiled with enormous predators whose very presence could shake the earth beneath their feet. The jungles were dense and impenetrable, with colossal beasts lurking behind every tree, waiting to strike in the shadows. The ground was alive with venomous creatures that could kill with a single bite, yet the Tsolok had adapted to it. All their bodies were stronger, their senses sharper, their minds honed by generations of struggle and survival. They had learned to thrive in this brutal environment, where others would have perished long ago. Their society was built upon this constant battle for survival. Only the strongest could rule, only the most cunning could command. They had conquered their planet through sheer force and willpower, becoming the most dominant species in the galaxy. They believed themselves to be invincible, having faced and overcome the harshest challenges the universe could offer. But there was one belief that had become their foundation, one that the Tsolok held with unwavering certainty, that they were the only true Deathworlders in existence. Every other species in the galaxy had been too weak to survive on a planet like theirs. Their technologies might be advanced, their civilizations might be flourishing, but none of them had faced the raw power of nature the way that Tsolok had. No one else had been forged in such crucible of constant danger and challenge. They were the pinnacle of evolution, the perfect species in their eyes. No one could challenge their place at the top. They had never even considered the possibility that another race might exist that could understand their struggles, that could live with the same kind of ferocity and will to survive. No, they believed they were alone at the top of the food chain, a belief that had been unshakable for centuries. Their warships ruled the stars, their colonies expanded to distant worlds. They controlled trade routes and kept the peace through sheer force. Their reputation was known throughout the galaxy as the most fearsome of all. The Tsolok considered themselves the epitome of strength. No other species dared to challenge them. In their minds, there was no need for alliances or diplomacy. They had nothing to learn from others until one day their scouts ventured too far into the unexplored territories of the galaxy, a part of space that no one had dared to investigate. They sent out a small expedition led by a veteran officer who had seen more battles than he cared to remember. The mission was simple: map new worlds and return quickly. But what they discovered in that far corner of space would shake the very foundation of everything that Tsolok believed. As they neared the edge of the system, their sensors picked up strange readings. An unknown planet with unusual levels of activity, no signature like any they had encountered before. Curious, the scout ship approached the planet carefully, their eyes widening as they took in the sight. The planet was covered in oceans and forests, but what caught their attention was the distinct lack of calm. They had expected to see something dangerous, but not something so chaotic. The storms, the beasts, the violent nature of the planet, all far beyond even their worst imaginings. This was a place that even the Tsolok could never have dreamed of, and yet it was inhabited. They quickly realized the truth, something they never thought possible. There was another species here, and it was not just surviving, it was thriving. The Tsolok were stunned. Their initial disbelief quickly gave way to a more unsettling realization. There was life on this planet, but what shocked them more was that this life form didn't just exist. It seemed to dominate its environment in ways that Tsolok could not comprehend. They observed from their ship as massive storms tore across the planet's surface, sending flashes of lightning that lit up the sky. But the creatures below seemed unbothered, undeterred by the harsh conditions. They were predators and prey alike, all adapted to the chaos around them. The planet seemed alive with danger. Every inch of land was a battleground, yet this strange species lived within it as if it were their home. The Tsolok watched for days, unable to tear their eyes away from the spectacle. The creatures fought against the elements, hunted one another, and survived the relentless challenges their world threw at them in ways that echoed their own survival struggles. But there was something different about these beings. They weren't just enduring, they were thriving. They used tools, weapons, like no others that Tsolok had seen before, and they seemed to work together as one. They were not isolated or divided by territory. As many species were, no, these beings were united in their need to conquer the harshness of their planet. With a terrifying efficiency, their social structures were unlike anything that Solok had ever known. Instead of the brute force they had relied upon for centuries, these beings seemed to favor strategy and innovation. They did not face the storms with raw strength alone. They used technology to outwit and outlast their environment. They had mastered the land's chaos, not by overpowering it, but by bending it to their will. They studied it, they adapted to it, they even controlled it with a level of sophistication that astonished the Tsolok. How could this species survive, let alone thrive, in such a place? Surely they were too weak to handle this world. How could something this fragile stand up to the planet's sheer force? What they didn't know was that this species was human, and they were nothing like the Tsolok had imagined. Humans had long learned to work together to combat the challenges their death world threw at them. They had developed technologies not simply for protection, but to reshape the world around them, making it their own in ways that the Tsolok would never have thought possible. The humans' ingenuity was unmatched. They used fire to tame beasts. They forged weapons to fight off the planet's predatory giants. They even manipulated their environment in ways that allowed them to cultivate the land and grow food amidst the very chaos that threatened their existence. The Tsolok could not understand how this was possible, but the more they watched, the more they realized the truth. These humans had something far more dangerous than raw physical strength. They had a boundless will to survive and the creativity to see possibilities where others saw only death. It was this drive, this relentless determination to adapt and overcome that set them apart from all the other species that Tsolok had ever encountered. The more that Tsolok learned about these humans, the more they understood that their belief in their own superiority was a fragile illusion. For the first time in centuries, they found themselves facing a species that could truly rival them. But even more disturbing was the nagging question that lingered in their minds: if the humans could survive in such a place, with such grace and mastery, then what did that say about the Tsolok? Were they truly the apex predators they believed themselves to be, or had they been living in a bubble of false superiority? All along, the scout officers could not answer the question, but one thing was certain: this new species would change everything. The Tsolok were forced to confront an uncomfortable reality. There were others in the galaxy capable of thriving in environments more brutal than their own. As they analyzed the humans more closely, they realized that these creatures were not just survivors of their death world. They were reshaping it, bending it to their will with a level of ingenuity that stunned the Tsolok. No longer was survival simply about overpowering the planet's inherent dangers. The humans had learned to think, to innovate, and to adapt in ways that turned their death world into an advantage. The Tsolok had watched as humans harvested resources from the planet's most hostile environments, not by brute strength, but through a combination of tools, collaboration, and ingenuity. Their cities stood not on flat plains, but on jagged cliffs, and within the very jungles that threatened to devour all who entered. Humans had learned to tame the land, using its fury to their benefit rather than trying to avoid it. And what troubled the Tsolok most was the realization that these humans didn't just adapt to the planet, they mastered it. Where the Tsolok had used violence to dominate their planet's predators, the humans used tactics, understanding and leveraging the world's dangers as a challenge to overcome rather than a force to resist. To the Tsolok, the notion of cooperation with a death world's dangers was alien. Their entire culture had been built around individual strength and dominance over nature, using technology to eliminate threats. To see an entire species flourish not by strength alone, but by their ability to collaborate, innovate, and outwit nature was disorienting. Yet there was no denying the evidence. The humans were not just surviving, they were flourishing. Their population grew in number and spread across continents, forming civilizations that stood tall in the face of the worst nature could throw at them. It wasn't long before the Tsolok decided that they needed to make contact. Their initial approach was one of caution. After all, they could not afford to underestimate a species that had proven itself so formidable. A fleet was dispatched, led by their most seasoned commanders and scientists, to make first contact. The Tsolok were determined to learn more about this species that seemed to defy all their expectations. When they arrived on the humans' world, it was nothing like the sterile, calculated approach they had expected. The humans didn't approach the Tsolok with fear or reverence, but with a calculated calm. The humans studied the Tsolok in return, their sharp eyes scanning every movement. They made no attempt to show submission, nor did they reach for weapons. Instead, the humans simply observed and waited. A meeting was arranged in a neutral location, a valley surrounded by towering cliffs. The Tsolok marveled at the scene. The humans had settled here, in the heart of a planet where storms lashed the land and predators stalked the shadows, and they had made it their home. The humans spoke first, not with threats or boasts, but with a calm curiosity that unsettled the Tsolok. They didn't challenge the Tsolok's strength, nor did they fear it. The humans merely asked questions about the Tsolok's purpose, their history, and the galaxy they hailed from. There was no arrogance in their tone, only a quiet confidence. For the first time, the Tsolok found themselves in a conversation where their superiority was not assumed. The humans didn't act impressed, nor did they fall into awe. Instead, they spoke as equals, questioning the Tsolok's claims to power and dominance. The humans, it seemed, had no need for validation. They simply existed, mastering their environment, challenging it, and pushing the boundaries of what even the Tsolok thought was possible. As the conversation progressed, a deep unease settled into the Tsolok hearts. They were beginning to realize that the humans were not intimidated by their reputation. The humans had nothing to prove, and this realization stung deeper than any weapon that Tsolok had ever wielded. They had met their match, but not in strength nor in cunning, but in a profound ability to live, to thrive, and to bend the very laws of nature to their will. The Tsolok were beginning to wonder if their own belief in their supremacy was as much a myth as the galaxies they had once ruled unchecked. The Tsolok had underestimated the humans from the very beginning, and the more they interacted with them, the clearer it became that their assumptions had been gravely wrong. Despite their technological superiority, the Tsolok couldn't shake the feeling that the humans were not only unafraid, but also indifferent to their power. The humans had faced challenges more severe than anything that Tsolok had ever imagined, yet their resilience was unwavering. No amount of threats or intimidation could provoke them. In fact, it was the Tsolok who began to feel the pressure, as the humans displayed a strange calmness in the face of everything that Tsolok thought was awe-inspiring. Unable to let the feeling of superiority go, the Tsolok decided to engage in a series of trials to prove their dominance, hoping to restore their sense of primacy. The challenge was simple: humans versus Tsolok in a contest of survival, a battle in the heart of the wilds where the planet's dangers were at their most vicious. The Tsolok set up the arena, a vast jungle filled with predatory creatures that could tear through armor in seconds. There were no rules here, only the brutal forces of nature. The humans were given a short time to prepare, allowed only the most basic of equipment, survival tools, a few weapons, and their wits. The Tsolok, on the other hand, brought with them their most advanced technology, their best warriors armed with energy weapons, personal shields, and mechanized exoskeletons. They believed that this contest would be a display of their superiority, a crushing demonstration that no species, especially not humans, could endure the same trials they had conquered. The event began at dawn, and immediately the Tsolok began to unleash their full might, charging into the jungle with precision and strategy. The air crackled with the hum of energy shields and the roar of weapons firing as they hunted down the jungle's most fearsome predators. The Tsolok were experts in tactics, each movement calculated to ensure that they did not falter. Their advanced technology provided them with unmatched strength, speed, and protection, and they believed this would be enough to crush the humans underfoot. But as the day wore on, it became increasingly apparent that the humans were not being overwhelmed. In fact, they were holding their ground. The Tsolok watched, confused, as a small team of humans maneuvered through the jungle with uncanny efficiency. They set traps with materials found in the environment, using the terrain to their advantage in ways that Tsolok had never considered. They outflanked their opponents, anticipating the Tsolok's every move and neutralizing their technology by using the environment itself as a weapon. By midday, the Tsolok began to falter. Their confidence had been shattered. The humans, armed with little more than survival instincts and crude weapons, were slowly but surely turning the tables on their technologically superior foes. The Tsolok's weapons, designed to obliterate entire armies, seemed almost clumsy in the face of the humans' relentless creativity. They fought not just to survive, but to outthink and outmaneuver their would-be conquerors. The Tsolok's warriors, despite their enhancements, began to feel the weight of fatigue as they struggled to match the humans' adaptability. The final blow came when a Tsolok warlord, once considered invincible, found himself surrounded by a small group of human soldiers who had learned to move like shadows. The warlord's energy shield flickered as a human sniper's arrow pierced the vulnerable gap in his armor, and before he could react, a human trap triggered beneath him, immobilizing his exoskeleton. His frustration was palpable as the humans simply stood there, watching, waiting. It wasn't brute force that had taken him down. It was strategy, ingenuity, and patience. In that moment, the Tsolok realized something profound. The humans didn't just survive their Deathworld. They mastered it in a way that defied the Tsolok's understanding of power. The Tsolok had expected to prove their dominance through strength alone, but it was the humans' resilience, their ability to adapt and overcome any challenge, that turned the tide. The Tsolok were no longer sure who was the true apex predator. As the trials concluded, the Tsolok were left to ponder the devastating truth. They had just been humbled by a species that had turned survival into an art form. The humans had not just endured, they had transformed their environment and adapted to it in ways that made the Tsolok's methods seem primitive in comparison. The humans' ingenuity was the real weapon, something that Tsolok had failed to comprehend until it was too late. The Tsolok returned to their ships after the trials, their pride shattered and their minds reeling from what they had just experienced. They had expected to face a challenge of strength, of endurance, perhaps even of courage, but what they encountered instead was something they had never considered. A species capable of turning survival into an art form, relying not on sheer power but on intellect, ingenuity, and an almost boundless adaptability. The humans had outsmarted them, outmaneuvered them, and humbled them in ways that no one else ever had. For the first time in their history, the Tsolok were unsure of their place in the galaxy. Back on their homeworld, the Tsolok High Command convened in secret. Their elite scientists, who had once prided themselves on their unmatched understanding of biology, technology, and warfare, now faced a new, unsettling question. How could such a species, seemingly weaker, less advanced in terms of raw firepower, pose such a threat? Their intelligence was undeniable, their creativity boundless, and their resilience unbreakable. The Tsolok began to study the humans with a new sense of urgency, seeking to understand what made them so formidable. They analyzed everything, from human biology to the way they interacted with their environment and one another. They examined the humans' social structure, their technology, their culture, and their biology. Every scrap of information was meticulously analyzed. The Tsolok scientists soon discovered a key difference that separated humans from all other species: their remarkable ability to adapt and evolve. While many species had evolved to survive in specific environments, the humans seemed capable of thriving in nearly any setting. Their biology was malleable, capable of evolving rapidly in response to changing circumstances. In many ways, humans were not just surviving, they were evolving in real time, adjusting to their environment, developing new ways to combat threats, and inventing new technologies at an astonishing pace. The Tsolok realized that their understanding of the universe was limited. They had thought that their superior physicality, their technological advancements, and their sheer dominance over their Deathworld made them the ultimate survivors, but the humans had shattered that illusion. The humans had mastered the most important skill of all: adaptability. The more that Tsolok learned, the more they became fascinated and terrified by the potential of humanity. These creatures, despite their lack of advanced weaponry or physical prowess, possessed an endless drive to adapt, to overcome, and to innovate. They had faced dangers that would have wiped out any other species and had not only survived but found ways to thrive. Where the Tsolok had used technology and brute force to subdue their world's harshest elements, the humans had used their minds to do the impossible. They had made even the most deadly environments their allies. The Tsolok began to see humanity not as a primitive species to be crushed, but as a force to be reckoned with. Their adaptability made them a dangerous species to ignore, one that could outlast and outthink even the most brutal forces of nature. And worse still, the humans didn't just survive. They thrived in environments that Tsolok had once considered impossible to inhabit. It became clear to the Tsolok leadership that the galaxy could no longer be divided into the strong and the weak. Humanity had fundamentally changed the rules of survival, forcing the Tsolok to reconsider their place in the greater cosmic order. They no longer felt like the undisputed rulers of their domain. The galaxy was not a simple place of predators and prey. It was a web of shifting balances and unforeseen challenges, and the humans were no longer the helpless prey that Tsolok had thought them to be. But there was still a lingering question that haunted the Tsolok minds. How far would humanity go? Would they remain a force confined to their own world, or would they begin to spread across the galaxy, reshaping every environment they touched? And could the Tsolok survive in a galaxy where humanity's creativity and adaptability could bend even the most hostile worlds to their will? The Tsolok were no longer certain. What had once seemed like the pinnacle of evolution now appeared to be just one path among many, and the humans had proven that there were other ways to survive, other ways to thrive. The galaxy had shifted, and the Tsolok were left to wonder how they could keep pace with this new, unpredictable force. The Tsolok knew they could no longer ignore the humans. Their understanding of the galaxy's order had been upended, and despite their superior firepower and advanced technology, they had underestimated a species that was not bound by the same laws of survival. The humans had proven themselves to be far more than just survivors of a death world. They were creators, innovators, and now, a species that could potentially alter the balance of power in the entire galaxy. Tsolok leaders convened in an emergency council. The warlords, scientists, and strategists gathered in a vast, dimly lit chamber, the walls lined with screens that displayed the latest intelligence reports on human activities. The council had come to a singular, unspoken conclusion that Tsolok could no longer simply rely on their strength or technology. To defeat the humans, they would need to evolve their approach, not only as warriors, but as thinkers, strategists, and diplomats. The first suggestion was to launch an all-out assault on the humans, using their overwhelming military superiority to crush them before they could spread beyond their homeworld. However, there was immediate resistance to this plan. The Tsolok knew that the humans' response to threats was not to cower in fear, but to rise up with unexpected ingenuity. Every attack they had made on the humans had been met with clever countermeasures. The warlords realized that brute force would only make the humans more dangerous. The Tsolok were not fighting a species that would bend to their will. They were facing a species that would adapt to any challenge and, worse, learn from it. Instead, the council decided to explore a different path: infiltration and manipulation. The humans were not invulnerable. There were still factions among them, divisions in their governments and cultures. Perhaps, the Tsolok reasoned, they could exploit these weaknesses. If they could not break the human spirit, they might be able to sow discord and division among their ranks, to turn them against each other and weaken their resolve. It was a risky strategy, but the Tsolok were desperate. They had underestimated the humans once, and they would not make the same mistake again. The Tsolok sent spies to infiltrate human colonies, using their advanced cloaking technology and subterfuge to observe and manipulate the political systems. They spread rumors, misinformation, and lies, hoping to exploit human differences and incite chaos. They knew that humanity was not a monolith, that internal conflicts were an inevitable part of any thriving civilization. The goal was simple: divide and conquer. If the humans could be made to distrust each other, they could be kept distracted long enough to delay their inevitable rise. Meanwhile, the Tsolok military began covert preparations for a full-scale invasion. They knew that to face the humans in direct combat again would be too costly. They would bide their time, observing human society's response to their covert efforts, carefully measuring their reactions. But as the months passed, something strange began to happen. The Tsolok spies were reporting back an unexpected development. The humans were not crumbling under the pressure. Instead, they were organizing, uniting, and adapting in ways that Tsolok had not predicted. Every piece of misinformation spread among them seemed to backfire. Far from being divided, the humans had become more focused, more cohesive in their determination. They were learning from each attack, becoming more vigilant, more capable of outthinking their would-be masters. What the Tsolok had failed to recognize was the resilience at the core of human nature, their instinct not just to survive, but to come together when faced with adversity. The more that Tsolok tried to fracture humanity, the more they seemed to unite. The covert efforts of the Tsolok began to unravel in ways that left their leadership perplexed. Instead of seeing a weakened, fractured species, the Tsolok began to witness a people who had taken their challenges and used them to forge a stronger, more unified society. It dawned on the Tsolok that they had miscalculated again. The humans did not break under pressure. They strengthened. No matter the manipulation, no matter the subterfuge, they were becoming a united front, and that front was growing stronger. The Tsolok leaders, once so confident in their strategy, now found themselves facing the terrifying possibility that the humans would not only survive, they would thrive. The Tsolok leadership was in turmoil. The humans, despite every attempt to manipulate, divide, and weaken them, were not only surviving, they were evolving, and at an astonishing rate. The more that Tsolok tried to fracture humanity, the more the humans adapted. Their unity was becoming their greatest strength, a force so resilient it seemed impervious to external pressures. The more that Tsolok studied the humans, the more they realized the horrifying truth. Humanity's strength didn't lie in their advanced technology, their weapons, or their brutal warriors. It lay in their unity, their ability to learn and grow together, their drive to solve problems collectively. The covert tactics, once seen as a foolproof strategy, had backfired. Rather than destabilizing human society, the Tsolok's efforts had served only to unite the humans. It became clear to the Tsolok that if they wanted to survive in a galaxy where humanity was rising, they would need to abandon their arrogance and adapt. They could no longer view the humans as a primitive species to be crushed underfoot. They had to face a hard truth. The humans had become a formidable adversary. In desperation, the Tsolok turned to their greatest weapon, their technological superiority. They began developing a new secret weapon, something that would give them an edge against the humans. They knew that the humans' greatest asset was their adaptability, so they focused on creating a weapon that would exploit their greatest weakness, their reliance on technology and innovation. The Tsolok developed a virus, a digital weapon capable of infecting and disabling human technology, rendering their advanced systems useless. If they could disrupt humanity's technological infrastructure, they reasoned, they could cripple the humans' ability to adapt and overcome. The virus was designed to spread quickly, to target everything from communication networks to defense systems. It would cripple human society, force them into a primitive state where they could no longer rely on their tools or machines. The Tsolok believed that by stripping humanity of their technological advantage, they would expose them for what they truly were. Just another species trying to survive on a hostile world, no different from any other. The virus was ready, and the Tsolok prepared to launch it across human colonies with surgical precision. The humans would finally be broken. But as they prepared to deploy their digital weapon, something unexpected happened. The Tsolok learned that the humans had anticipated such a move. In their studies, the humans had already detected the Tsolok's attempts at cyber warfare and had begun developing countermeasures of their own. It was a race the Tsolok had underestimated once again. Within days, the humans had deployed their own virus in response, a countermeasure designed to neutralize the Tsolok's cyber weapon before it could infect their systems. The Tsolok realized with growing horror that their digital weapon had been turned against them. Their reliance on technology, Their belief in the superiority of their cyber warfare tactics had once again backfired. The Tsolok watched in disbelief as their own systems were infected by the humans' counter-virus. Their military networks, their communications, their weapons, all of it was crippled. The Tsolok, who had relied on their advanced technology to maintain their dominance, were now left vulnerable. The humans, who had once seemed like an inferior species, were now outsmarting them at every turn. In a matter of hours, the Tsolok were facing a complete technological collapse. The devastating realization settled over the Tsolok leadership like a storm. They had misjudged the humans in every possible way. The humans were not just survivors, not just a species that could endure. They were a species capable of evolving faster than any other species in the galaxy. Their ability to adapt was not limited to their physical forms or their survival strategies. It extended to their technology, their tactics, and their collective will. The Tsolok were no longer sure if they could outsmart or outlast humanity. The galaxy was changing, and the Tsolok had no idea how to respond to a species that had proven time and time again that they could rise to any challenge, no matter the odds. The Tsolok leadership stood at the edge of a precipice, their once unshakable confidence in their superiority crumbling beneath them. For millennia, they had believed themselves to be the pinnacle of evolution, their strength and technology unmatched across the galaxy. Yet here they were, facing a species that had turned their every tactic against them. The humans, whose existence had once seemed insignificant, had become a force of nature, a species whose ingenuity, adaptability, and sheer will to survive had outpaced even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. As the Tsolok scrambled to regain control over their collapsing networks, they realized they were no longer in charge of their own fate. The humans had made it clear that they were not just another Deathworld species. They were an evolving threat, capable of overcoming anything the Tsolok threw at them. But the Tsolok were not a race to surrender easily. They had faced extinction before and had risen from it with brutal determination. Yet now, they were confronted with an adversary that seemed to defy every conventional rule of survival. In the wake of their defeat, the Tsolok began to consider a radical possibility. They might need to change. It was a painful realization, one that went against everything they had ever believed. But it was undeniable. The humans had not only adapted, they had changed the very definition of survival. Their success lay not in their brute strength or their ability to dominate others, but in their willingness to work together, to innovate, and to bend the world around them to their will. If the Tsolok were to survive in this new galaxy, they would need to embrace those same qualities. The Tsolok leaders, humbled and beaten, began a long, painful process of reevaluating their culture and their ways of life. Their warriors, who had once been revered for their brutal strength, now found themselves questioning their approach to warfare. The Tsolok had always fought to win by overwhelming force, but the humans had shown them that the true key to victory was adaptability, cooperation, and thinking beyond the physical battlefield. The Tsolok scientists, once proud of their technological advances, now recognized the limitations of their reliance on technology alone. They had underestimated the human ability to outthink and outmaneuver them, and in the process, they had failed to evolve in the same way. As the Tsolok regrouped and licked their wounds, they began to extend an olive branch, reluctantly, but with growing resolve, to the humans. It was not a plea for mercy, but an invitation for cooperation. The Tsolok realized that if they were to survive in a galaxy where humans had risen to power, they would need to learn from them. The humans, for all their flaws, had shown the Tsolok a path forward, a way to evolve, not just physically or technologically, but socially, emotionally, and intellectually. It was an uncomfortable proposition for a race that had always valued individual strength above all else, but the Tsolok had no choice but to change. The humans, to their credit, did not respond with hostility or mockery. They had learned that the greatest threats to their survival often came not from the external, but from their own inability to work together. It wasn't just the Tsolok that needed to change, it was the entire galaxy. The human response was not one of vengeance, but of cautious optimism. They understood that the galaxy could not be divided into simple binaries of predator and prey. They had become a species of builders, not destroyers, and while the Tsolok were a formidable force, humanity was learning that the future would require more than strength. The first tentative steps of cooperation between the Tsolok and humans were not without difficulty, but they were a beginning. The humans offered their knowledge of resilience and adaptation, while the Tsolok shared their advanced technology and combat expertise. It wasn't an alliance born of mutual trust, but of necessity, a recognition that they had something to learn from one another. In time, the two species began to reshape the galaxy together, not as conquerors, but as builders of a new order. The Tsolok, once certain of their superiority, now found themselves walking alongside the humans, not as rulers or subjugates, but as equals. Together, they faced challenges they had never imagined, ones that threatened to tear the very fabric of the galaxy apart. But this time, they did so with a shared understanding that survival was not about being the strongest, but about being able to adapt and grow in the face of adversity. The galaxy, it seemed, was no longer a place for conquerors. It was a place for creators. And in the end, it was the humans who had taught the Tsolok that the true strength lay not in power, but in the ability to change and evolve, to face the unknown not with fear, but with hope. The Tsolok had once believed they were the only Deathworlders, but in the end, it was the humans who had shown them that Deathworlds were not something to be feared, but something to be mastered.